Welcome into Out of Order, everyone. My name is Ben Mayer.
My name is Anthony Buono.
Today we're going to be talking about new housing laws in Colorado. I always love diving back into the housing discussion.
Love the housing thing, dude.
Because
that is our bread and butter.
It's so important.
That
right?
is like the most important thing. We talk about, rising costs for stuff. The number one thing that people spend their money on is housing, and it's only getting more expensive.
Yeah, and
unless you live in Austin, because they're killing it over there.
True. Austin and Minneapolis doing a great
that's
job.
another one doing a great job.
But yeah, mostly, I mean, besides food, housing's the one thing that everyone needs.
Yeah.
So, Colorado, I think, has passed some measures to get us closer to the affordable housing market that we're looking for all over the country right now. So they passed 4 different laws, and I think they're of variable importance. So I just want to go through them.
Yeah.
First is a law that upzones around public transit corridors.
That is huge.
Yes, it requires zoning at a density of an average of 40 units per acre, which is about like a 4-story apartment building around transit corridors. We as Massachusetts residents are very familiar with this because Massachusetts passed a law, a very similar law about 3 years ago now?
Yeah, it was called the MBTA Communities Act. And
Yeah.
It was all about forcing local governments to zone their communities to include upzone certain aspects of their towns
Yes.
that were nearby transit. So to encourage, transit reliant population, and then also add more housing to the stock.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a big political fight in our local communities, but it's important that those types of things come from the state level down.
Yeah.
Because it's really important that municipalities kind of get off their ass and take action. A lot of municipalities don't want to build more housing.
Totally.
A lot of people are scared to build more housing. They're worried about the value of their homes, even though I'm not always convinced that it hurts the value of their homes. Right? It doesn't. From the studies that we've
not
seen.
necessarily.
So no, it's very important that it comes from the state down. I'm glad Colorado's taken action on it too.
Totally. And what's great about having it in these public transit corridors, of course, is one of the big worries with upzoning is you're going to increase traffic so much, the congestion is going to be terrible, and this way, hopefully, people are able to exist more without cars, right? And just using the public transportation more, which is also better for the environment. So that's all good things. We're also going to be going into this week on our deep dive a new assessment of different interventions against single-family zoning. And this law specifically that they passed to upzone in the transportation corridors, I really like because this 40 units per acre density is high enough to actually have some solid impact on a housing crisis, rather than being like you can't only zone for single family homes, and instead you could make it for duplexes or for triplexes.
Sure.
Right? This is actually going to enable enough housing to be built that it could make a dent in the market, and that's huge.
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to talk about again about how this is good for the climate.
Yeah.
A lot of people think bad. A lot of people think city and they think dirty and they think carbon and they think smut, But in reality, living in a city means you have a way smaller carbon footprint than if you live in a suburb or a rural area. Go look up a carbon heat map. The greenest place in the United States is Manhattan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The quintessential urban filth, quote unquote, that people who aren't from a city will think about.
Yeah.
It's the greenest place in the country because people don't really drive.
Exactly. Yeah, you think about it per capita more
Right.
than right. So on the other hand of this, what I think is going to be a pretty effective upzoning around transit corridors is introducing a law that permits the construction of ADUs, accessory dwelling units, in larger cities and towns. We just talked about this recently because Brookline, the town that both of us live in, just passed a law to make it easier to build ADUs here.
Yep.
And we were texting about how it's not really going to do anything.
I think the analysis is we might add 20 units over the course of 5 years. Which is something. I mean, it's better than nothing.
It's basically a non-starter. It does almost nothing.
Yeah.
One other one was legislation eliminated minimum vehicle parking requirements for some new apartments, which is good. Parking requirements are actually
so bad.
They're an enormous addition to housing costs. They raise prices enormously, to a ridiculous amount. And I've always just been so confounded by it. Not so confounded, because the reason that there are parking requirements in every town and city is because the people that come to town meetings or to city council meetings or whatever it is and complain are the ones that are saying they think there's too much traffic and there needs to be more parking because too much of the street parking is taken up. And so they want to make the city require more parking every time there's more development. But in my mind, it makes so much more sense for new developments to build parking as they require. So it's a force that's driven by the market rather than having a floor put on it by the government, because then you're effectively pricing out kind of a lower end housing development that might be able to happen in a more urban area, right, where someone doesn't need a car. So the more that I think we can get rid of parking requirements, the better. The fact that they did something is good, but this law got watered down as it went through the legislature because that's the only way it was going to pass, which is too bad. And then the last one is just kind of a weird one to me, where they preempted local rules that restricted individuals from living with roommates. So Colorado had laws against people living with a certain number of roommates that didn't have the same last name as them, that weren't in the same family. So you're only allowed to live basically in an apartment with 3 roommates that aren't in the same family, which meant that basically there was a common situation of people just living in places without the lease, because there would be 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms that would happen. But then,
really
but then there are residents that they don't get protections of people who are on the lease.
Right.
So it just kind of, it makes no sense. And
that seemed like a quick, easy housekeeping fix.
It is. And so often when you look into these housing, like these local housing laws, it's like,
what are you doing?
What were you thinking?
What are you thinking?
Makes no sense.
God, what are you, stupid? Okay. So,
but I mean, yeah. Like that's kind
of, were stupid.
They were stupid. So.
In addition to all this, there's also a new package in here that I really like. There's a new set of bills that's going to be on the governor's desk that's going to allow seniors to qualify for up to $800 a year in tax credits. Now, this is great because these elderly people were normally locked out of this tax credit because it only went to homeowners. But now it's also going to be going to renters as well.
That is good.
This is good because a lot of the laws on the books are heavily in favor of homeownership. Like the mortgage tax deduction. That's a huge welfare program that the government does to subsidize home ownership.
Yes.
Renters don't see a subsidy for their rent, but people see a subsidy for their mortgage. And so this is a good example of elderly people who got tax breaks for living in their home, but they didn't get tax breaks for owning a home, but didn't get tax breaks for paying their rent. And that's a huge disparity between rich and poor, right? A rich person or a well-off person is going to own their house compared to someone who is not as well off. They're going to end up renting their whole life.
Yes.
And so they're going to be locked out of this welfare program.
Totally. It's just completely backwards logic because homeowners are almost always wealthier than renters. And there are so many laws on the books that benefit homeowners. So,
and not all of them are bad, but it needs, if they're going to exist, you can't cut out the renter part.
Yeah, there's no reason to benefit to advantage homeowners over renters.
No, definitely not anymore.
Exactly.
Right?
No.
This other piece, House Bill 1434, is going to increase the state's affordable housing tax credit over the next 8 years. And it's going to bring it from $50 million up to $120 million in state tax credits.
Okay.
So it's more than double their current affordable housing tax credit. I mean, why you look so skeptical? I saw that. I'm like, that seems great.
I mean, low affordable housing tax credits probably good, but they're not my preferred remedy for the housing market.
It says most of the financial relief aimed at renters is restricted to low-income households, including many middle-class families. What does that mean?
I mean, it's means tested.
Okay.
Basically, it would be my assumption.
Okay.
But I think Democratic governments a lot of the time, like Democrats, Big D Democrats, we lean towards just throwing money at the poor when that doesn't do anything to fix broken or imbalanced markets. And what we have with housing is an imbalanced market, and throwing money at people on the low end of the market.
These low housing
nothing but a Band-Aid.
But these affordable housing tax credits are for developers. to build more housing.
Okay.
Yeah. So these affordable housing tax credits allows developers to subsidize thousands, but it's the developers who are building the housing that's going to have.
Right.
So it is building new housing.
Okay, that I am definitely happier with.
Yeah. It's not just rent subsidization. Okay. That's a problem, right?
Yes.
That's like a huge issue. Even Biden makes big mistakes on that type of policy.
Oh, yeah.
When he's like, "Oh, I'm going to give you $4,000 towards your first house." Okay, stop. That's not the fucking problem.
No.
It's not that we don't have enough money. It's the fact that there aren't enough houses.
Yes.
Please stop throwing more money at that problem.
Yes.
You do not have to subsidize demand anymore. You need more supply.
Exactly.
Stop subsidizing demand.
We're chilling on the demand
Yeah,
side.
please
okay?
stop subsidizing demand.